The hospital room monitor flatlines. 9-year-old Emily, bald from chemotherapy, whispers through cracked lips, "If I die, promise you'll take care of Daddy." Catherine Mills, billionaire CEO, clutches the child's hand while Tom collapses in the hallway. This little girl who solved a $300 million algorithm is now fighting for her life. Before we dive in, comment where in the world you are watching from and don't forget to click subscribe. The security alert on Catherine Mills' phone showed movement in her executive office at 11:47 p.m. She sat up in her downtown penthouse bedroom, immediately awake and alert. Nobody should be in that office. The building was supposed to be empty except for the night cleaning crew. She pulled up the security camera feed on her tablet, expecting to catch a thief or corporate spy. What she saw instead made her freeze in complete bewilderment. A small figure sat in her leather executive chair, blonde pigtails barely visible over the massive mahogany desk. The child, who couldn't be more than 9 years old, was working intently on Catherine's computer, her small fingers moving across the keyboard with surprising confidence. Papers were spread across the desk, and the main presentation screen showed tomorrow's crucial board presentation, the one Catherine had been struggling to complete for the Microsoft acquisition that would make or break her company's future. Catherine threw on clothes and drove the 15 minutes to her office building in 8, her mind racing through possibilities. Corporate espionage using a child. Some elaborate scam. By the time she reached the executive floor, her confusion had transformed into cold determination. She moved silently down the hallway, her sneakers making no sound on the thick carpet. Through the glass wall of her office, she could see the child more clearly now. A girl, maybe 8 or 9, wearing a faded purple sweater and jeans that were slightly too short. She was completely absorbed in whatever she was doing, occasionally referring to handwritten notes beside her. Catherine pushed open the door, ready to confront this bizarre intruder. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" The girl's head snapped up, green eyes wide with terror. She looked like a deer caught in headlights, frozen in the executive chair that dwarfed her small frame. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry," the girl stammered, tears immediately filling her eyes. "I was just trying to help. My dad's going to lose his job and it's all my fault, and I heard you talking about the presentation, and I know about computers, and I just wanted to fix it so you wouldn't fire him." The words tumbled out in a panicked rush. Catherine's anger faltered at the genuine distress in the child's voice. "Your father works here?" The girl nodded, tears now sliding down her cheeks. "He's the night janitor, Tom Matthews. He's worked here for 3 years, and he's the best dad in the whole world, and he brought me tonight because Mrs. Chen couldn't watch me, and he said I had to stay in the break room and be invisible, but I got bored, and I heard you earlier when you were yelling at someone about the presentation being wrong, and I wanted to help." Catherine knew Tom Matthews, though she'd never paid him much attention. A tall, quiet man in his mid-30s who efficiently cleaned her office every night, never speaking unless spoken to. She vaguely recalled seeing him with a child once or twice in the parking garage, quick glimpses of a different life that existed parallel to but separate from her corporate world. "Wait," Catherine said, processing the girl's words. "You heard me talking about the presentation and decided to fix it? How would you even know what needs fixing?" The girl, Emily she'd later learn, wiped her nose with her sleeve. "Because I listened when you were explaining it to Mr. Davidson earlier. You said the data visualization wasn't compelling, and the financial projections didn't account for the seasonal variations in software sales. And you were right. The graphs were all wrong. They showed linear growth when software sales are cyclical. So I fixed them." Catherine moved around the desk to look at the screen, her disbelief mounting. The presentation was indeed different. The clunky graphs she'd been struggling with had been replaced by elegant, dynamic visualizations that clearly showed the cyclical patterns Emily mentioned. The financial projections had been recalculated with what appeared to be a more sophisticated algorithm. The entire flow of the presentation had been restructured to tell a more compelling story. "This is actually good. More than good, it was brilliant. How did you do this?" Emily's tears slowed, replaced by a tiny spark of pride. "I'm good with computers," And numbers. Dad says I got it from Mom. She was a software engineer before she died. That was 4 years ago. I was only 5, but I remember she used to let me sit on her lap while she coded. She taught me that computers are just tools for solving puzzles, and presentations are just stories told with data. Catherine sank into the visitor's chair across from her own desk, trying to process this surreal situation. A 9-year-old janitor's daughter had broken into her office and improved a presentation that her team of MBAs and consultants had been struggling with for weeks. "How long have you been working on this?" Emily glanced at the clock on the wall. "Since about 9:30. Dad started cleaning the 5th floor then. I got bored of my book and wandered around, and then I heard the recording from earlier playing on your computer. You must have been reviewing it. The presentation was still open, so I just started fixing things. I'm really sorry. I know I shouldn't have touched anything." The girl started to cry again, the weight of her transgression catching up with her. Before Catherine could respond, the door burst open. Tom Matthews stood there, his face white with panic. His janitor's uniform was rumpled, and he looked like he'd run up 10 flights of stairs. "Emily!" "Oh God, Miss Mills, I'm so sorry. I've been looking everywhere for her. She was supposed to stay in the break room. Emily, what have you done?" The anguish in his voice was palpable. He looked between his daughter and Catherine, clearly expecting the worst. "Dad, I'm sorry," Emily sobbed, scrambling down from the chair and running to him. "I just wanted to help. I didn't mean to cause trouble." Tom gathered his daughter into his arms, then looked at Catherine with devastation written across his features. "Ms. Mills, I take full responsibility. I know bringing her here was against policy. My babysitter had an emergency, and I couldn't miss work. I'll pack up my things immediately. Whatever Emily has done, I'll pay for it. Please don't press charges. She's just a kid. She didn't mean any harm." Catherine stood slowly, her mind working through the implications of what she'd discovered. "Tom, wait. Don't resign yet. Look at what she did." She gestured to the presentation on the screen. Tom looked confused but moved closer to see, Emily still clinging to him. "Your daughter didn't vandalize anything. She improved my presentation, the one for tomorrow's board meeting about the Microsoft acquisition. She identified flaws that my entire team missed and fixed them in less than 2 hours." Tom stared at the screen, then at his daughter, then back at Catherine. "Emily, did you really do this?" Emily nodded against his chest. "The data was wrong, Daddy. It didn't show the seasonal patterns, and the story wasn't clear. Mom always said that data without a story is just noise." Tom's arms tightened around his daughter, and Catherine saw tears in his eyes. Sarah would say that. It was one of her favorite phrases. Catherine made a decision that surprised even her. "Tom, Emily, sit down. We need to talk." She moved back behind her desk, studying the father and daughter who sat nervously in the chairs across from her. "Tom, tell me about yourself. What's your background? How did you end up working here as a janitor?" Tom shifted uncomfortably. "It's not a very interesting story, Miss Mills. I was an accountant at a small firm downtown. When Sarah, my wife, got sick, I used all our savings for her treatment. After she died, I couldn't afford childcare for the regular business hours, and the firm let me go. Night janitorial work lets me be there for Emily during the day, get her to school, help with homework. The benefits here are good and the pay is enough to keep our apartment. It's honest work. And Emily's education. She's obviously gifted. Emily is in the gifted program at her public school," Tom said with quiet pride. "She tests off the charts in mathematics and computer science. Her teachers want her to apply to the Davidson Academy, that private school for exceptional children. But even with financial aid, we could never afford it." Catherine turned to Emily. "Where did you learn to do this kind of data analysis and visualization?" Emily looked at her father for permission to speak, and he nodded. "Mom taught me the basics before she died. Then I learned from YouTube videos and free online courses. The library has computers I can use. Ms. Rodriguez, the librarian, helps me find programming books. And sometimes I watch MIT courses online. They have free ones. Dad doesn't know, but I use his laptop after he falls asleep to practice coding." Tom looked shocked. "Emily, you never told me that." Emily's voice was small. You already work so hard, Daddy. I didn't want you to worry about getting me a better computer or paying for courses. I can learn for free. It just takes longer. Catherine felt something shift in her chest, an emotion she hadn't experienced in years of corporate battles and hostile takeovers. This man was sacrificing his career to raise his daughter, and this brilliant child was teaching herself advanced programming to avoid burdening her father. Meanwhile, Catherine spent more on lunch some days than Tom probably made in a week. The presentation blinked on the screen, its elegant solutions mocking Catherine's previous attempts. Tomorrow, this presentation would be shown to the board, potentially securing a deal worth hundreds of millions. And it would only succeed because a 9-year-old girl had snuck into her office. "Emily," Catherine said carefully, "would you like to walk me through the changes you made? I want to understand your thinking." Emily's face lit up, the fear finally fading. "Really? You want to know?" Catherine nodded, and Emily scrambled back to the computer, her father watching in amazement as she began explaining complex data relationships with the enthusiasm only a child could bring to something they loved. See, here you had the quarterly projections displayed as separate entities, but they're all interconnected. Software sales in Q4 spike because of holiday enterprise purchases and end-of-year budget spending. But you weren't showing that correlation. And here, she clicked to another slide. The cost-benefit analysis was only looking at immediate returns, not the long-term value of Microsoft's distribution network. Mom always said you have to think in systems, not snapshots. For 30 minutes, Emily walked them through her changes, and Catherine found herself taking notes. This child had identified issues that had been nagging at Catherine's subconscious, but that she hadn't been able to articulate. The presentation was transformed from a dry financial document into a compelling narrative about strategic growth and synergy. Tom watched his daughter with a mixture of pride and wonder, clearly seeing a side of her he hadn't fully recognized. When Emily finished, she looked at Catherine hopefully. "Did I do okay?" "More than okay," Catherine said. "Emily, you've just saved a deal worth $300 million. The board meeting is at 9 a.m. tomorrow, and I'm going to use your version of the presentation." Emily's eyes widened. "Really? My work is going to be in a real board meeting?" Catherine made another decision, one that would have seemed insane 3 hours ago. "Actually, I'd like you both to be there. Tom, can you arrange for Emily to miss school tomorrow morning?" Tom looked stunned. "Ms. Mills, I don't think that's appropriate. I'm the janitor. I don't belong in a boardroom. You're Emily's father, and Emily is the one who created this presentation. You both belong there. Besides, after the board sees this, we're going to need to have a different conversation about Emily's future, and yours." Tom started to protest, but Emily grabbed his hand. "Please, Daddy, I want to see what a real board meeting looks like. How could any father refuse those hopeful green eyes?" Tom nodded slowly, though he still looked like he might wake up from this strange dream at any moment. Catherine stood, her mind already working through the implications of this discovery. "Tom, take Emily home. Get some rest. Be here at 8:30 tomorrow morning. Wear your best clothes. Emily, bring those handwritten notes you were using. I want to understand your process better." As they prepared to leave, Emily turned back. "Miss Mills? Are you really not mad that I broke into your office?" Catherine considered the question. "Emily, you didn't break in. You walked through an open door and tried to help. What you did was wrong. You should never touch someone else's computer without permission. But your intentions were good, and your execution was brilliant. Sometimes the best solutions come from the most unexpected places. We'll call this a learning experience for both of us." As Tom and Emily left, Catherine remained in her office, staring at the transformed presentation. 9 years old. The child was 9 years old and had just solved a problem that had stumped her entire executive team. She thought about Tom, quietly cleaning offices at night, raising a genius daughter on a janitor's salary, never complaining, never asking for more. She thought about Emily, teaching herself advanced programming in secret to avoid burdening her father. And she thought about herself, so focused on corporate success that she'd never noticed the extraordinary people working in her own building. Her phone buzzed with a text from her CFO. "Is the presentation ready for tomorrow?" Catherine smiled, typing back. "It's perfect. Better than perfect, actually. You're not going to believe who fixed it." She spent the rest of the night reviewing Emily's changes, understanding not just what the girl had done, but how she'd thought through the problems. There was an elegance to Emily's solutions that reminded Catherine of her own early days in tech, before corporate politics and profit margins had dulled her creative edge. This child saw patterns and connections with a clarity that years of business school couldn't teach. At 3 a.m., Catherine finally went home, but sleep eluded her. She kept thinking about Tom and Emily in what was probably a small apartment, the father who'd given up his career for his daughter, the daughter who was teaching herself skills that could change their lives if given the proper opportunity. By dawn, Catherine had made several decisions that would ripple through the coming weeks. The next morning, Tom and Emily arrived at 8:25, Tom in an ill-fitting suit that was probably 10 years old, Emily in what was clearly her best dress, navy blue with a white collar. They looked nervous and out of place in the marble and glass executive lobby. Catherine met them personally, ignoring the curious stares from other executives arriving for the meeting. "Emily, are you ready to see your presentation in action?" Emily nodded eagerly, clutching a folder with her handwritten notes. Tom looked like he might bolt at any moment, but Emily's excitement kept him grounded. The boardroom was already filling when they arrived. 12 members of the board, all in expensive suits, all radiating the kind of power that came from controlling billions in assets. They looked curiously at Tom and Emily as Catherine led them to seats along the wall. "Ladies and gentlemen," Catherine began once everyone was seated. "Before we begin the presentation on the Microsoft acquisition, I want to introduce you to the person who created it. I'd like you to meet Emily Matthews, age 9, daughter of Tom Matthews from our maintenance staff. Emily is the architect of what you're about to see." The room erupted in confused murmurs. Richard Blackstone, the board chairman, frowned. "Catherine, is this some kind of joke?" "No joke, Richard. Last night, Emily identified critical flaws in our original presentation and rebuilt it from scratch. What you're about to see is entirely her work. I think you'll find it illuminating." She began the presentation, walking through Emily's elegant solutions, her sophisticated data analysis, her intuitive understanding of market dynamics. The board members' skepticism gradually transformed into attention, then into genuine interest. The cyclical patterns Emily had identified were undeniable. Her projections, based on historical data patterns, rather than optimistic assumptions, were more realistic and, paradoxically, more compelling. When Catherine finished, the room was silent. Then Richard Blackstone, a man who'd built his fortune on recognizing talent, spoke. "Young lady, where did you learn to do this kind of analysis?" Emily looked at her father, who nodded encouragingly. "From my mom before she died, and then from the internet, sir. I like puzzles, and data is just another kind of puzzle. You just have to find the pattern." Richard smiled, something Catherine had rarely seen. "What do you want to be when you grow up, Emily?" Emily straightened in her chair. "I want to be like my mom was, a software engineer who solves important problems. But also like my dad. Someone who takes care of people and works hard even when things are difficult." The board voted unanimously to proceed with the acquisition using Emily's presentation framework. But more importantly, after the meeting, Richard pulled Catherine aside. "That child is extraordinary. What are we doing about it?" Catherine had been waiting for this question. "I'm proposing we create a full scholarship for Emily at the Davidson Academy, funded by the company as part of our community development program. Additionally, I'd like to offer Tom a position in our accounting department. His background is in accounting, and our night janitor shift prevents him from using his actual skills." Richard nodded approvingly. "Do it. And Catherine? Keep an eye on that girl. Minds like hers are rare. With the right nurturing, she could change the world." As the boardroom emptied, Catherine found Tom and Emily waiting in the hallway. Tom looked overwhelmed, Emily excited. "The board loved your work, Emily. They approved the acquisition using your framework." Emily beamed. But then her face grew serious. "Ms. Mills, does this mean my dad won't lose his job? I heard some of the other janitors saying there might be layoffs." Catherine knelt to Emily's level. "Your dad's job is safe. In fact, I want to talk to both of you about some changes. Tom, you mentioned you were an accountant before. Would you be interested in joining our accounting department? Day shift, better pay, benefits that include educational support for dependents?" Tom's mouth opened and closed without sound. Emily answered for him. "He's saying yes. Daddy, you can wear your suit every day instead of just today." But there was more. "Emily," Catherine continued, "how would you feel about attending the Davidson Academy? It's a school for gifted children like you, with advanced programs in mathematics and computer science. We'd like to sponsor your attendance." Emily's eyes went wide as saucers. The Davidson Academy? But that's where all the really smart kids go. The ones who build robots and win science competitions. "That's exactly where you belong," Catherine said firmly. "You just solved a $300 million problem. I think you're qualified." Tom finally found his voice. "Ms. Mills, this is incredibly generous, but I can't accept charity. We've managed on our own since Sarah died. I appreciate what you're trying to do, but we don't need pity." Catherine stood, her CEO instincts kicking in. "Tom, this isn't charity or pity. Your daughter has a gift that could benefit not just your family but potentially thousands of people if properly nurtured. And you have skills that you're wasting pushing a mop when you could be contributing at a higher level. This is a business decision. I'm investing in talent." The transition wasn't immediate or smooth. Tom started in the accounting department 2 weeks later, and the adjustment was harder than anyone anticipated. His co-workers, some of whom had walked past him for years without acknowledgement when he was cleaning their offices, now had to accept him as an equal. Some did so graciously, others with obvious resentment. Tom heard the whispers about him being the janitor who got promoted because his kid was smart, about Catherine showing favoritism, about how he didn't really belong, but Tom had endured worse. He'd held his wife's hand as she died, raised a daughter alone, cleaned toilets to keep food on the table. Office gossip was nothing compared to real hardship. He arrived early, stayed late, and proved through meticulous work that his accounting skills, though rusty, were solid. Within a month, he'd identified several inefficiencies in the expense reporting system that would save the company thousands. Emily's transition to Davidson Academy was equally challenging, but for different reasons. The school was a different world from her public school, with its state-of-the-art computer labs, small classes, and students who spoke casually about their parents' vacation homes and private tutors. Emily arrived in her carefully maintained but obviously second-hand clothes, carrying a backpack held together with duct tape, and immediately felt the weight of not belonging. But then she sat in her first advanced mathematics class, and everything else faded away. The teacher, Mr. Chen, was explaining concepts Emily had only glimpsed in her secret late-night online studying. Here, finally, were people who spoke her language, the language of algorithms and equations, patterns and possibilities. When Mr. Chen posed a problem to the class about optimizing network traffic flow, Emily's hand shot up with a solution that made him pause and reconsider his own approach. Catherine watched their progress from a distance at first, not wanting to seem like she was hovering, but she found herself checking in more than necessary, stopping by Tom's desk to review reports that didn't really need her attention, accepting Emily's invitation to the school's parent showcase night, even though she wasn't technically a parent. That evening at Davidson Academy proved to be another turning point. Emily had been selected to present her project, a predictive algorithm for analyzing social media trends to identify emerging market opportunities. As she stood at the front of the auditorium, confidently explaining complex mathematical concepts, Catherine felt an unexpected pride swelling in her chest. Tom stood beside her, tears in his eyes as he watched his daughter shine. "She gets her confidence from her mother," Tom said quietly. "Sarah would have been so proud." "She must have been remarkable," Catherine replied. "Emily talks about her often." Tom smiled sadly. "She was. Brilliant, funny, kind, She saw potential in everyone. She would have liked you. The comment surprised Catherine. Really? Even though I'm the type of corporate executive who probably would have ignored her at a party. Tom chuckled softly. Sarah had a way of seeing past surface things. She would have recognized what I'm starting to see, that underneath the CEO exterior, you're someone who cares more than you let on. Someone who didn't have to help us but chose to anyway. Before Catherine could respond, Emily finished her presentation to thunderous applause. She ran off the stage straight to them, throwing her arms around her father, then surprising everyone by hugging Catherine too. Did you see? Did you see how they understood my algorithm? Mr. Chen says, if I keep developing it, it could be published in a real academic journal. That evening, Catherine invited them to dinner to celebrate. Not to a fancy restaurant that would have made Tom uncomfortable, but to a small Italian place Emily had mentioned wanting to try. Over pasta and breadsticks, they talked about everything and nothing. Emily's excitement about her classes, Tom's observations about the company's accounting practices, Catherine's upcoming negotiations with potential partners. It felt natural, comfortable, like something Catherine hadn't experienced in years. Family. That night, lying in her pristine penthouse bedroom, Catherine admitted to herself what she'd been avoiding. She was falling for Tom Matthews, not because he was handsome, though he was in an understated way, or because he was some project she could fix, but because of his quiet strength, his devotion to his daughter, the way he saw through her corporate armor to the person underneath. And Emily. Catherine had never wanted children, had never felt that maternal pull other women described, but Emily had somehow bypassed all her defenses. The girl's brilliant mind, her enthusiasm, her resilience in the face of loss. It all combined to create a child Catherine wanted to protect and nurture and watch grow into the remarkable woman she would surely become. The problem was the power dynamic. Catherine was Tom's boss, Emily's benefactor. Any personal relationship would be complicated by professional entanglements. The very thing that had brought them together now stood as a barrier between them. The situation came to a head 3 months later at the company's annual gala. Catherine had invited Tom and Emily as her personal guests, insisting they attend despite Tom's protests about not belonging at such an event. Emily had been excited about wearing a fancy dress, and Catherine had quietly arranged for a shopping trip where Emily could choose something appropriate without Tom knowing about the cost. The night of the gala, when Tom arrived in a rented tuxedo with Emily in her new emerald green dress, Catherine felt her heart skip. They looked like they belonged there, Tom handsome and dignified, Emily radiant with excitement. But the evening took an unexpected turn when Richard Blackstone cornered Catherine during cocktails. "Interesting situation you've created, Catherine," he said, his tone neutral but his eyes sharp. "The janitor's daughter was a remarkable find, but I hope you're being careful about appearances. There's already talk about your relationship with them being more than professional." Catherine's spine stiffened. "I'm not aware that mentoring a gifted child and employing her father constitutes inappropriate behavior." Richard sipped his whiskey. "Of course not. But you and I both know how things can be perceived. A single female CEO spending personal time with a single father she promoted from janitor to accountant, taking special interest in his daughter. The optics aren't ideal." Before Catherine could respond, she heard a commotion near the dessert table. Emily's voice, usually so confident, was small and defensive. "I do belong here. Ms. Mills invited me." A group of executives' children, teenagers who attended prep schools and viewed events like this as their birthright, had surrounded Emily. One boy, the son of a board member, was speaking. "Sure, your dad cleaned these offices, right? And now he's playing accountant because you impressed the boss? My father says it's nepotism." Emily's face was red, tears threatening. "It's not nepotism. My dad earned his job. He found errors in your father's expense reports, actually. Saved the company $50,000. The boy's face darkened. "You little charity case." But before he could finish, Tom was there, placing himself between Emily and the teenagers, and Catherine was right beside him, her presence commanding immediate attention. Is there a problem here? Catherine's voice was ice. The teenagers scattered, but the damage was done. Emily was crying silently, her confidence shattered. Tom looked murderous but contained. Catherine knelt beside Emily, not caring that her designer gown was pooling on the floor. Emily, look at me. Those children are wrong. You belong here more than they do. You earned your place through brilliance and hard work. They were born into it and have done nothing to deserve it. That's why they're threatened by you. Emily hiccuped through her tears, but they're right about one thing. People think Dad only got his job because of me, that you only helped us because you feel sorry for us. Catherine glanced at Tom, seeing her own pain reflected in his eyes. Then she made a decision that would change everything. Emily, would you and your dad come with me for a moment? She led them to a quiet balcony overlooking the city. The night was clear, stars barely visible beyond the light pollution. Catherine took a breath, knowing she was about to cross a line she couldn't uncross. Emily, you're right that I helped you initially because I recognized your talent. But somewhere along the way, things changed. You and your father became important to me not as a project or an investment, but as people I care about. Deeply. She turned to Tom. I've been trying to maintain professional boundaries, but I can't pretend anymore. Tom, I'm falling in love with you, with both of you, and if that compromises my position as CEO, then I'll choose you over the job. Tom stared at her, stunned. Catherine, you can't give up your company for us. That's not who you are. Maybe it's who I need to become, Catherine replied. Someone who understands that success means nothing if you have no one to share it with. Emily looked between them, her tears forgotten. Wait, does this mean you want to be like our family? Like, officially? Because I've been hoping for that, but Dad said it was complicated because you're his boss and rich and we're not, and it wouldn't be appropriate, but I think appropriate is stupid when people care about each other. The run-on sentence, so typically Emily in its enthusiasm and honesty, broke the tension. Tom laughed, then Catherine laughed, and suddenly they were all laughing on the balcony, while the gala continued inside without them. Tom stepped closer to Catherine. You need to understand something. I've been falling for you too, watching you with Emily, seeing how you've gone from this untouchable CEO to someone who comes to school presentations and eats spaghetti with us on Tuesday nights. But I can't be the reason you give up everything you've built. Catherine, this company is part of who you are. Then help me figure out how to have both, Catherine said, because I'm very good at solving business problems, but this is new territory for me. Tom reached out, taking her hand. Emily immediately inserted herself between them, grabbing both their hands. I have an idea. Mom always said that when you have a problem with multiple variables, you need to isolate each one and solve them separately. So first, we figure out the work thing, then we figure out the family thing. But we do it together, because that's what families do. The solution came from an unexpected source. Richard Blackstone, who'd been watching the drama unfold, approached them when they returned to the gala. Catherine, a word? He led her aside while Tom and Emily went to find food that hadn't been contaminated by teenage cruelty. I've been thinking about our earlier conversation. You're right that there's nothing inappropriate about your relationship with the Matthews family. In fact, I think it's the best thing that's happened to you in years. Catherine blinked in surprise. But you said the optics? The optics can be managed, Richard interrupted. What can't be managed is a CEO who's lost her humanity. You've been running on empty for years, Catherine. All work, no life. The Matthews family has changed that. I see it in how you approach problems now, with more creativity, more empathy. It's made you a better leader. He paused, then continued. Here's what I propose. Tom Matthews is wasted in accounting. His real talent is in analysis and problem solving. Create a new position for him in strategic planning, reporting directly to me instead of you. That removes the direct supervisory relationship. As for Emily, formalize her relationship with the company as a junior consultant or intern with a proper contract and compensation. It's unusual, but not unprecedented. Tech companies have been recruiting younger and younger talent. That legitimizes your interest in her development. Catherine felt hope blooming. You'd support this? Richard smiled. Catherine, I've built my fortune on recognizing potential. Tom Matthews has it. Emily certainly has it. And you have the potential to be not just a successful CEO, but a happy one. Don't let fear of perception rob you of that chance. The restructuring happened quickly. Tom's transition to strategic planning was smoother than his move to accounting had been. Reporting to Richard instead of Catherine removed the conflict of interest, and his analytical skills quickly proved valuable in identifying market opportunities. Emily's role as a junior consultant was more controversial, but when she contributed to 3 successful product launches in her first month, even the skeptics had to admit she earned her place. But more importantly, with the professional barriers addressed, the personal relationships could flourish. Tuesday night dinners became a tradition, alternating between Catherine's penthouse and Tom's apartment. Emily had a key to both places and had essentially colonized a room in each, filling them with her computers, books, and endless sticky notes covered in equations. The first time Tom kissed Catherine, it was in her office, after hours. Emily was at a coding club meeting, and they were reviewing strategic plans that neither was really paying attention to. "You know," Tom said, "we've solved the work complications. Emily's happy. The board's satisfied. There's really only one thing left to figure out." "And what's that?" Catherine asked, though she knew exactly what he meant. Tom stood, moving around the desk to where she sat. "This," he said simply, and kissed her. It was gentle and tentative at first, both of them aware of all the reasons this shouldn't work. But then Catherine's arms went around his neck, and his hands tangled in her hair, and all the reasons why not dissolved in the face of the simple truth that they fit together. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. Tom rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Catherine Mills. Not because you're CEO, not because you helped Emily, but because you're brilliant and driven and you eat terrible Chinese takeout straight from the container while reviewing spreadsheets. You sing off-key in the car when you think no one's listening. You've learned every obscure programming language just to keep up with Emily's conversations. You're remarkable." Catherine felt tears slip down her cheeks. "I love you too, both of you. Emily burst into my life like a tiny hurricane of algorithms and energy, and you followed with your quiet strength and terrible dad jokes and the way you make everything feel safe and possible. I didn't know I was lonely until you two showed me what it was like not to be." Their relationship wasn't without challenges. There were raised eyebrows when they went public, whispers about gold digging and power imbalances. Some of Tom's old colleagues from his janitorial days felt he'd betrayed them by crossing over to management. Some of Catherine's executive peers wondered if she'd lost her edge, gone soft. But for every critic, there were more supporters. Employees who saw Catherine's transformation from demanding but distant CEO to engaged and accessible leader. Parents at Davidson Academy who watched Emily bloom under the combined support of her father and Catherine. Board members who noted that the company's innovation index had never been higher. 6 months after that first kiss, Catherine found herself in a familiar situation, but with a completely different feeling. She stood before the board presenting quarterly results, but this time, Tom was in the room as part of the strategic planning team, and Emily was there too, having been invited to present her latest algorithm for predicting consumer behavior patterns. As Catherine spoke about the company's record profits and groundbreaking innovations, she caught Tom's eye. He smiled, that gentle encouragement she'd come to rely on. Emily gave her a thumbs up from her seat, barely able to contain her excitement about her upcoming presentation. This was success, Catherine realized. Not just the numbers on the screen or the accolades from the board, but this feeling of having people who mattered, who celebrated your victories and supported you through defeats. After the meeting, as they walked out together, Emily between them chattering about the board's reaction to her presentation, Catherine felt a completeness she'd never known was missing. Her phone buzzed with urgent emails, deals to be made, crises to be solved. But for once, they could wait. Right now she was walking with her family, yes, her family, toward lunch at Emily's favorite restaurant where they would celebrate with milkshakes and laughter. Because success, real success, wasn't measured in millions or market share. It was measured in moments like this, walking between the man you loved and the child you'd chosen, knowing that whatever challenges tomorrow brought, you wouldn't face them alone. The crisis came 8 months later, not from the expected sources of corporate politics or social judgment, but from a place none of them had anticipated. Emily collapsed during her advanced robotics class at Davidson Academy. One moment she was excitedly explaining her newest algorithm to her teammates. The next, she was on the floor, unconscious, her skin pale and clammy. The call came to Tom first, then Catherine, both of them racing to the hospital with terror clawing at their chests. The diagnosis was swift and devastating: acute lymphoblastic leukemia, the same cancer that had taken Sarah, though the doctors assured them it was purely coincidental, not genetic. The survival rates were good with proper treatment, they said, but the words sounded hollow when you were looking at a 9-year-old girl connected to machines, her vibrant energy reduced to numbers on monitors. Tom fell apart in a way Catherine had never seen. This strong, steady man who'd survived his wife's death and single parenthood crumbled in the hospital hallway. "Not Emily," he kept saying. "Not my baby girl. She's all I have left of Sarah." Catherine held him as he sobbed, her own tears falling silently as she whispered promises she wasn't sure she could keep. "We'll get through this. The best doctors, the best treatment. She's strong, Tom. She's the strongest person I know." But strength seemed irrelevant in the face of cancer cells multiplying in a child's body. The treatment protocol was aggressive. Chemotherapy that would require Emily to be hospitalized for weeks at a time, followed by radiation, followed by more chemo. The doctors talked about stages and percentages, while Emily, pale but alert, asked about the mathematical probability models they were using for treatment planning. Catherine took control the way she did in any crisis, with systematic efficiency. She had Emily transferred to the best pediatric oncology ward in the country, bringing in specialists from around the world for consultations. She converted a suite at the hospital into a command center where Tom could work remotely, and Emily could continue her studies when she felt well enough. She hired private nurses, arranged for tutors, and essentially moved into the hospital herself. But all the money and resources in the world couldn't change the fundamental reality. Emily was seriously ill, and the treatment was brutal. The first round of chemotherapy left her violently sick, her bright spirit dimmed by nausea and exhaustion. Her beautiful hair, the same color as her mother's, fell out in clumps until Tom finally helped her shave it off, both of them crying through the process. It was during the second week of treatment that Emily said something that shattered and rebuilt Catherine's heart simultaneously. Catherine was sitting beside her bed, working on her laptop while Emily dozed. Suddenly, the girl's eyes opened, focused with that clarity that sometimes came between the waves of medication. "Catherine, if something happens to me, will you take care of Daddy?" Catherine's laptop nearly slid to the floor. "Nothing's going to happen to you, sweetheart. We're going to beat this." Emily's expression was too knowing for a 9-year-old. Mom said the same thing. But she still made plans, just in case. She told Daddy about the special songs for my birthday, about which books to read me, about how to do my hair. She made sure he'd be okay without her, but if I have to make plans, I want to make sure you'll both be okay without me. Catherine moved to the bed, gathering Emily's frail form into her arms. "Emily Matthews, you listen to me. You are going to survive this. You're going to grow up and change the world with that brilliant mind of yours. You're going to go to MIT and solve impossible problems and probably win a Nobel Prize before you're 30. But if you need to make plans to feel better, then yes, I promise I'll take care of your dad, and he'll take care of me. Because that's what families do." Emily relaxed against her. "We are a family, aren't we, even though it's not official?" Catherine kissed the top of Emily's bald head. "We're as official as it gets, baby girl." The treatment stretched on for months. Good days when Emily felt well enough to work on her algorithms, even creating a predictive model for her own treatment outcomes that impressed her oncologists. Bad days when she could barely lift her head, when Tom and Catherine took shifts holding her while she endured the pain and sickness. Terrible days when her white cell count dropped dangerously low and they had to gown up just to be near her. The company ran without Catherine's daily presence, Margaret Wu stepping up as interim CEO while Catherine worked from the hospital. Some board members grumbled about her absence, but Richard Blackstone shut them down firmly. If any of you had a child fighting cancer, this company would support you unconditionally. Catherine has given everything to Nexus for years. Now Nexus gives back. Tom tried to maintain normalcy, working on strategic plans from the hospital room, but his focus was entirely on Emily. He read to her for hours, all her favorite books plus new ones Catherine brought. He learned to manage her medications, to recognize the signs of complications, to be both father and nurse. Catherine watched him tend to his daughter with infinite patience and love, and fell even deeper in love with this man who could be so strong and so vulnerable simultaneously. It was during the 3rd month of treatment, a particularly bad stretch when Emily had developed an infection that required isolation, that Tom finally broke completely. Emily was sedated, fighting the infection with the help of powerful antibiotics, and Tom stood outside her room, unable to even hold her hand. "I can't lose her, Catherine. I can't. She's everything. She's all I have left of Sarah. She's the best parts of both of us. If she dies, I die too. There's nothing left after that." Catherine grabbed his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. "Tom Matthews, you listen to me. Emily is not going to die. She's fighting, and we're fighting with her. And even if the unthinkable happened, which it won't, you would not die too. You would live because that's what Emily would want. That's what Sarah would want. And because I need you. I can't do this without you." They clung to each other in that sterile hallway. Two people bound together by love for a remarkable child who was fighting a battle they couldn't fight for her. Days blended into nights, weeks into months. Catherine learned the names of all the nurses, the preference of each doctor, the meaning of every beep from every machine. She became an expert in childhood leukemia, reading every study, questioning every treatment decision, pushing for the most innovative approaches. Tom became the emotional anchor, the one who could always make Emily smile even on her worst days, who knew exactly when she needed distraction and when she needed to talk about her fears. Together, they formed a fortress around Emily, protecting her not from the reality of her illness, but from facing it alone. The turning point came after 4 months of treatment. Emily's oncologist, Dr. Patel, entered the room with an expression they'd learned to read as cautiously optimistic. "The latest scans show significant improvement. The cancer cells are responding better than expected to the modified protocol. We're not out of the woods yet, but Emily's numbers are moving in the right direction." Emily, who'd been working on her tablet despite the fatigue, looked up with interest. "What percentage improvement? And what's the statistical probability of continued positive response?" Dr. Patel smiled, having grown accustomed to his youngest patient's analytical approach to her own illness. 47% reduction in cancer cells, with an 82% probability of continued improvement if we maintain the current protocol. Emily nodded, processing this data. "Those are acceptable numbers, better than my initial projections." She turned to Tom and Catherine. "I'm going to be okay. The math says so." It took another 3 months of treatment, of careful monitoring, of hope balanced with caution. But gradually, Emily's strength returned. Her hair began to grow back, coming in slightly curlier than before. Her energy increased, allowing her to attend some classes remotely from her hospital room. Her spirit, which had never truly dimmed, blazed back to full brightness. The day Dr. Patel declared her in remission was supposed to be a day of pure celebration. And it was, with tears and hugs, and Emily immediately asking when she could return to school full-time. But that evening, after Emily had fallen asleep in her own bed for the first time in 7 months, Tom and Catherine sat on the porch of the house they'd essentially moved into together during her treatment and faced what had been unspoken. "I need to ask you something," Tom said, his voice careful. "During all of this, when Emily was at her sickest, why did you stay? You could have hired nurses, sent money, checked in regularly. But you lived at that hospital with us. You put your entire life on hold. Why?" Catherine was quiet for a long moment, considering her answer. 6 months ago, I would have said it was because I loved you both. And that's true. But it's more than that. Somewhere during those long nights, holding Emily while she was sick, working beside you, fighting for her together, I stopped being able to imagine any life that didn't have you both in it. You became my family in every way that matters, not just people I love, but people I can't exist without. Tom reached over, taking her hand. Sarah would have loved you, he said softly. She would have loved how fiercely you fought for Emily, how you never let us give up hope. And she would have been happy that I found someone who could love Emily as much as she did. Catherine squeezed his hand. I just wish Emily didn't have to go through this. No child should have to be that brave. She was brave because she had us, Tom said. All three of us together. That's what got her through. The next morning, Emily bounced into the kitchen with more energy than she'd had in months. I have an announcement, she declared. I've been thinking about everything that happened, and I've created a new algorithm. Catherine and Tom exchanged amused glances. Another algorithm? What's this one for? Emily pulled out her tablet, showing them a complex flowchart. It's for matching sick kids with the right support systems. See, when I was in the hospital, I noticed that some kids had lots of visitors, and some had none. Some had parents who could be there all the time like you guys, and some had parents who had to work and couldn't visit much. So I created a system that matches kids who need support with volunteers who can provide it, like Uber, but for hospital visits. Tom stared at his daughter in amazement. Even while fighting cancer, she'd been thinking about how to help others. Catherine was already considering the practical applications. This could actually work. We could pilot it at the Children's Hospital, then expand nationally. Emily, this could help thousands of kids. Emily nodded matter-of-factly. That's the point. I was lucky. I had both of you. But lots of kids don't have that. This way, no kid has to be alone when they're scared. Over the next few weeks, as Emily regained her strength, they developed her idea into a real program. Catherine used her business connections to set up a nonprofit, Tom handled the logistics and planning, and Emily refined the algorithm and served as the spokesperson. The program, called Emily's Network, launched 6 months later and was immediately successful, connecting sick children with screened volunteers who could provide companionship, homework help, or just a friendly presence during treatment. But there was something else brewing. Something Tom and Catherine had discussed during those long hospital nights. On the first anniversary of Emily's remission, they held a celebration at their home. All of Emily's doctors and nurses were invited, along with friends from school, colleagues from work, and several families from Emily's network. As the party wound down and the sun set over the backyard where Emily was teaching a group of kids her latest puzzle game, Tom clinked his glass for attention. Before everyone leaves, Catherine and I have an announcement. Well, actually, we have a question for someone very important. He turned to Emily, who looked up curiously. Emily, you've been through more in the past year than most people face in a lifetime. You've shown us what real courage looks like. You've also shown us what family really means. Not just people related by blood, but people who choose each other, who fight for each other, who refuse to let go even when things get impossibly hard. Tom got down on one knee, and Catherine joined him. Emily's eyes went wide as Tom pulled out a small box. Inside were 3 rings, each interconnected with the others. Emily Matthews, Tom continued, his voice thick with emotion. Catherine and I want to know if you'll let us officially become a family. If you'll let Catherine adopt you as her daughter, and if you'll be our official daughter when we get married next month. Emily didn't hesitate. She launched herself at both of them, nearly knocking them over in her enthusiasm. Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. Can I plan the wedding? Can we have it in the hospital children's ward so the kids can come? Can I design the invitations using my algorithm to optimize guest seating arrangements? They laughed through their tears, holding their brilliant, brave, beautiful daughter who had survived the unthinkable and come through it thinking of others. The wedding was indeed held in the children's hospital, transformed with flowers and lights into something magical. Emily, her hair now a short pixie cut that she wore with pride, served as both maid of honor and best girl. switching sides throughout the ceremony to support both her parents. She'd written her own speech, which she delivered with the confidence of someone who'd faced death and decided life was too short not to say what you meant. My mom, my first mom Sarah, died when I was 5. I don't remember everything about her, but I remember she told me that love multiplies. It doesn't divide. When you add more people to your family, you don't have less love for each person. You have more love altogether, like variables in an equation that increase the total sum. She looked at Tom and Catherine, who were both crying openly. Dad thought he'd never love anyone again after Mom died. Catherine thought she didn't have room in her life for love at all. And I thought I might not survive to see what happened next, but we were all wrong. Love found us anyway, in a boardroom at midnight, in a hospital room at 3 a.m., in all the small moments between. And now we're a family. Not because we have to be, but because we choose to be. Every day. As Tom and Catherine exchanged vows, promising to love each other in sickness and health, for richer or poorer, the words carried extra weight. They'd already been through sickness and health with Emily's cancer. They'd experienced richer and poorer, not in money, but in spirit. They'd proven their commitment in hospital hallways and boardrooms, in moments of triumph and despair. The rings they exchanged were designed by Emily, of course, each featuring a small algorithm she'd created that, when decoded, spelled out the date they'd first become a family, not the wedding date, but the night Catherine had found Emily in her office, changing all their lives forever. The reception was a joyful chaos, with children from the hospital able to attend in wheelchairs and with IV poles decorated with ribbons. Emily had indeed created a seating algorithm that somehow placed everyone exactly where they needed to be for maximum happiness. Richard Blackstone gave a toast about recognizing potential in unexpected places. Tom's former colleagues from his janitorial days, all invited and welcomed, spoke about how Tom had never been too proud to help others, even when he was struggling himself. And Dr. Patel talked about the power of love in healing, how Emily's recovery had been aided by the unwavering support of her parents. As the evening wound down, Catherine found herself standing with Tom and Emily on the hospital's rooftop garden, looking out over the city lights. A year ago, she'd been a CEO who measured success in market shares and profit margins. Now, she was a wife and mother who understood that real success was measured in moments like this. Emily pointing out constellations and explaining the mathematical principles behind their movements. Tom's arm around her waist, steady and sure. The knowledge that tomorrow would bring new challenges, but they would face them together. "I love you both," Catherine said suddenly, the words still feeling new and wonderful in her mouth, more than any algorithm could calculate. Emily grinned. "Actually, I'm working on an algorithm for quantifying love based on actions, time spent, and physiological responses. Initial calculations show that our family love exceeds standard parameters by approximately 300%. Tom laughed, pulling them both closer. "Only 300%? I think your algorithm needs adjusting, Butterfly. It's got to be at least 500. As they stood there debating the mathematical quantification of love, the city sprawled below them, the hospital hummed with life and healing, and the stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to human struggles but witness to human triumphs. They were an unlikely family, formed through midnight presentations, childhood cancer, and the recognition that sometimes the most valuable things in life came from the most unexpected places. A janitor who was really an accountant, a CEO who was really just lonely, and a little girl who saw solutions where others saw problems, who faced death with algorithms and courage, who brought two lost souls together and created a family through sheer force of will and love. 6 years later, Emily Matthews Mills would stand on a stage at MIT, the youngest person ever to receive their doctoral program in artificial intelligence. In her acceptance speech, she would talk about the algorithm that had started it all, the one she'd drawn on a CEO's presentation when she was 9 years old. She would thank her parents, both of them, for showing her that the best solutions often came from the most unexpected combinations, and she would announce her newest project, an AI system designed to identify hidden talent in overlooked populations, inspired by a janitor who became a strategic planning director and a CEO who learned that success without family was just another form of failure. But that was the future. Tonight on a hospital rooftop, three people who'd found each other in the most unlikely circumstances held each other close and knew that they'd already solved the only equation that truly mattered. The one where love, courage, and choosing each other every day added up to a family.